Welcome to this week's episode of Being Human. I'm delighted to say I sit down with Howard Lewis, a fascinating man. He's a YouTuber, an art collector, and the founder of Offline, a monthly gathering with a simple aim to bring together a diverse set of people to share a meal together. Now, whilst that might seem like a distant prospect for many of us right now, there's an awful lot to learn from Howard's message about recreating human connection, slowing things down, simplifying our lives, creating space for spontaneity. I beseech you to take a deep dive with Howard in this episode. Without further ado, I give you Howard Lewis. Welcome to this week's episode of Being Human. I'm here with Howard Lewis in this wonderful building in Marylebone in London, which I understand is your family office, and maybe we can talk a little bit more about that. I first got to know you through your YouTube channel Offline, which I'm sure we'll talk about. Howard, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Delighted to be here. Delighted to already share lunch, part of your life story, talk a little bit about Offline, what you're doing, and also a few pictures as well.
Yes,
so
exactly.
I'm very much in your hands.
No, it's a delight to be here. You can't see this, obviously, but we are surrounded by paintings, portraits. I've had a tour of the building here. So you're somebody with a deep interest in art, as well as somebody with many interests, including this idea around the need for us to get offline to connect, I suppose, more authentically or more deeply or something. But let's start with Offline. What's that about and how did it start?
Well, Offline, in very simple terms, is just a celebration of the virtues of randomness and serendipity. And I'm a great believer that actually there's far more that connects us as people than separates us. But the modern world, particularly through social media, would suggest otherwise. People are very quick to reinforce what they do really, really well, but tend to ignore things they're not quite so good at. And I think that creates a sense of separation, which is rather unnatural. Most of us actually, Richard, were pretty useless at most things when we first started.
Yes.
Very few people are an expert on day one. They said, yes, guess what? I played Mendelssohn and it went like a dream. Or I cycled and actually, I broke the record this afternoon. No, people build up expertise in whatever area over a period of time. And that also includes relationships. And I think the problem today is people are very fearful of being wrong or acting inappropriately. And I created Offline really, in the first place, as a simple means of gathering people together without a purpose, without a cause, without a reason, just simply the fact that we could share all kinds of random elements in our lives together, whatever they may be, wherever we came from. And actually, the genesis of it was simply that I used to read so widely, and I would cut things out of the newspaper, articles and so on and so forth. So I think people would find it interesting. And the feedback was almost universally popular. People always come back saying, wonderful, I really enjoyed that, learned something I didn't know before. And eventually, one of my friends, one of the recipients, just said to me, what about everybody else? In other words, I'm getting interesting articles on different subjects. What's everybody else getting? And I thought, that's an interesting idea. Why not bring people together over a supper somewhere, share a few articles and see where it goes? And it was a great success. And I realized two things. First of all, actually, most people love to share their insight and expertise in whatever area it may be. Secondly, the food's a great leveler. When you eat with people, you learn a great deal about them.
Yes, that's right. And that struck me as we were talking beforehand. And such a simple insight, which I guess a lot of us know intuitively, but we don't eat together a lot as a culture, do you? I mean, I think of my time in the corporate lifestyle, and the norm was to go get a sandwich and eat at your desk, and that's
interesting. I have a friend who I'll connect you with separately. And he is a marketer, but he's basically involved in food in particular. And one thing which he and his partner have done is create a format where people working in very large companies all come together to eat great food in an interesting venue, maybe once a week, once a fortnight, and so forth, just because, as you mentioned before, people in large organizations find it surprisingly difficult to walk across the corridor or walk down 2 flights of stairs and say, hello. And you need to find a reason to bring them together straightforwardly. People don't do it naturally, as though somehow, if they step out of turn or do something which is not required, there may be some terrible consequence. And therefore, they put their head down, don't tend to get distracted, and therefore a lot of the conversations, some which are random, It could be about the football last weekend. It could be about an obituary you read in the newspaper or somebody you knew 25 years ago. And that's all it takes to get the conversation going. And the problem is today, people are very fearful of having the wrong conversation at the wrong time and with the wrong person.
Right. And I think, yes, there could be some, and our default is to not risk it, right? But if we have something that pushes us into a social situation where we are encouraged to share with others, then the magic happens, right? So
I think what happens is people forget to be scared.
Yes.
The biggest inhibitor is the fact that people are terribly worried. I actually share this offline. There are a great many people who I come across, both at offline and in life generally, who spend a great deal of time tiptoeing around the edge of the proverbial swimming pool. And on occasion, accidentally on purpose, I give them a nudge. And they fall into the water. And once they're in the water, nobody cares, frankly, whether you fell at the deep end or the shallow end. Nobody cares whether your costume is green or it's red. The only unifying fact is you're wet. Nobody in the pool says to you, Richard, I am more wet than you. You're all wet. And I think the point really is actually there's far more that we share, however superficial or deep that level may be, than not. And I think this is the big problem. I think just getting past first base is the biggest impediment of all. People are fearful somehow they're doing something which is either inappropriate or not called for which they're not qualified, or some point may be caused to be questioned. And I think there's a great virtue in spontaneity. Just do it. Do it first, ask questions afterwards. Because really, unless you're doing something which is actually going to be critical, nothing terrible is going to happen. Okay, somebody may think you've got a terrible sense of humour, maybe, but you can live with that. Somebody may think actually they can't stand your accent very well. Okay, you can live with that too. But these are not reasons enough not to start. What matters most of all really is whether you get the right vibe and there's an encouragement to carry it on. That's what's interesting.
Right. But I suppose you could say that people potentially have that issue online as well as offline, don't they, right? I mean, if I wanted to make some post that seems outside of what my peer group expect of me, I might feel some fear there. Equally, to go have lunch with somebody at the office, right?
But life is a risk, do you say, actually, I'm not getting the tube this morning because I can't guarantee it's going to deliver me at my office at 8:30. No. Hopefully you'll get there at 8:30, might be at 25 to 9. But nevertheless, the fear is that if I cannot control my immediate environment and what may happen thereafter, I'd rather not start. And that, in my view, I think is a danger. Now, there are many factors which want to determine how we behave. Peer group pressure is one of them. The fashion of the moment's another. Whether you have a certain number of likes or dislikes on a particular thread on social media, lots of different things. But I think the problem in a way is that too many people are scared to think for themselves. They're waiting for some approval. They're waiting for somebody to validate their opinion. Rather than saying, yes, this is what I think, whether it's about, frankly, my flower arranging, whether it's about the way I cook paella, whether it's the fact that I seem to forget your name every time I see you, whatever it may be. But the fact of the matter is, people are very, very fearful of what may go wrong rather than what may go right. And that becomes a massive blockage.
And you think by setting up, is it true that by setting up offline and getting people into this space, you help them? Is this the equivalent of you giving them a nudge into the swimming pool? Is it getting them over their initial fear?
A little bit. I've had many people, obviously you'll see when you come, but offline basically embraces a very, very wide universe. I don't really care what people do, where they come from. I don't want their money, their status, or anything like that. My care is what they give and what they share and how open they are. I've had many people come from very senior positions, very successful people, who openly admitted to me, I came and I was terrified. Because I would be running a business with a turnover of 20, 30, 50 million, but I knew my business, I knew my colleagues, my partners, what we'd done before. And one person I remember very well who said, I came and I really was not sure whether I'd be able to make it through the first course because people I didn't know, didn't understand. But in a funny way, once actually we moved on, I forgot to be scared. And the drinks went round, somebody else asked how I was, where I came from, my accent I remember from years ago. There are many triggers which encourage people just to make that first step. I think to myself, first base is the biggest single problem. When there are too many people on it, I do encourage somebody to run to second base or third or fourth.
Yes, yes.
And some people, once they get going, can't stop.
Yes.
You got a home run here. Yeah, we're good to go. People carry on going. Yeah. And that's a wonderful thing. But I think for many people, whatever their background, wherever their age, wherever their upbringing, getting past first base, overcoming the fear of being wrong, is the biggest single challenge. You see it in companies as well as individuals.
Yeah, no, that's right. And I suppose it makes sense that form of socializing, eating together, it's a primal form of socializing. It's the one perhaps that humans know and understand the best. So perhaps it makes sense.
What's interesting about obviously eating together, which you mentioned, is obviously today, certainly in Western culture, we use knife and fork. Once upon a time, Richard, of course, people use their hands. And in certain cultures, of course, there are no utensils.
Yeah, so now I lived in Tanzania for a while. And
well, there we go. So that's right. I went to an Ethiopian restaurant in London a while ago. Of course, they give you this wonderful bread name, which I now forget. And there's all kinds of dips and sauces. And basically, you all have the same piece of bread. You tear off strips, you dip in and out. You are touching one another. You are engaging. There is a physicality to the process. You don't have it in quite the same way you used to with a knife and a spoon, for example. But never physically being around the table together. Just sitting and eating without talking, eating without thinking, eating without expressing yourself in some other way. Just sometimes watching other people enjoying eating also is a good thing. But you've got to allow yourself time. And one of the problems which we touched upon before is that people are generally in too much of a hurry. I'm not quite sure where they're going half the time. I mentioned before people jogging outside. I don't get that at all. Jogging to me, I always see people running in the street are just late. That's why they've got the kit on. They've got a vest, a pair of shorts, haven't got dressed in time. Yeah. Nevertheless, what I'm trying to say is that communal activity is much recommended. And when you are part of a group, you often forget to be scared. You are looking at visual cues from other people. Some people actually because they've got a very strong personality, or maybe they've got a loud voice, or maybe because they happen to have a certain serenity or grace about them. And it stops you in your tracks. You're captivated by a moment, a look, a thought perhaps. But it's about allowing yourself a little bit of time to absorb the moment, rather than just take the moment, move on with it, discard it, and on to the next one. Unfortunately, the technology we have today does not encourage contemplation for the most part. It doesn't encourage you to say, guess what, that's a really good idea. Let me come back to you tomorrow. Or let me consult with somebody else I know, just get a second opinion, and we'll think about it in due course. It's all about now. If, for example, we talked about before about, if you were a professional 25, 30 years ago, you wrote a letter to somebody. Take a day or two to get there, person will read it at the other end, compose a response, 4 or 5 days for you to both think about what was happening in both directions and what your motivations may have been. Today, you're a professional, you respond to an email in 4 hours, I think you've died or you've lost the plot or something. But the fact is that you are not given, in my view, license to think and take your time and reconsider and reflect, all which is very valuable. Now, when you do that as part of a group, it's often easier because you've seen with 6 or 8 people, for example, normally somebody will have a query or a different angle. But the problem in a way is that, and I mentioned this in contact with somebody else the other day, it's really about how you go about your actions, how you are perceived by other people, how you come across to them. And I think one thing which is very, very evident to me in the modern world, particularly in business, is the notion of winning rather than being successful. And I think there's a very big difference between the two. I'm not sure you've experienced this yourself, companies you've advised and so on. Winning is very adversarial. If I win, you lose. It's binary.
Yeah.
Success by its very nature tends to involve teamwork. You can be successful on your own. You could be a pianist or a golfer maybe, but normally even there is a sense there's a team behind you supporting and cajoling and encouraging and so forth. And then, of course, you look at the word win. Look at it in a graphic sense. It's sharp, it's angular, lots of pointy edges. Then let me show you success. It's very soft, and wavy and rather voluptuous. You kind of think, yes, I'll sit down, I'm going to sit at the other side of it, I'll do it again tomorrow. It's something you want to do again. And I think, again, also listen to the words, if you look at an onomatopoeic sense, win, it's sharp, it's to the point. Success, it kind of goes on. I think if I got too many S's here, maybe I have that one over here as well. The sensation is very different. And I think too many people, whether in business or in life, are very much more concerned with winning and reinforcing their superiority and trampling you underfoot if you're on the way as well, than success. Because success normally is about consensus. It's about something which is more collegiate. And I think it's something you associate with a team of people.
Yes. And that metaphor works for me. I win if I get my sandwich and I get back to and I'm done in 10 minutes and I'm back working.
Yeah, no,
but I don't really have a successful sandwich, but I can have a successful meal.
Or I did it in actually 9 minutes yesterday. My standards are slipping here. What's going on? I mean, I can't believe I was in the worst possible queue, and the guy didn't remember my order from yesterday, how incompetent are these people? The problem, in a way, is that it creates a level of intolerance. And I think on a human level, I think we find much more to share in the areas where we're weak rather than we're strong. Most people, by definition, are not expert in most things. Some people are particularly good at one or two things, which is great. Whether you're a great driver or whether you're a great golfer or whether, in fact, you simply visited every port around the world, some people have done things very well for whatever reason. But actually, you find that the things which connect us obviously are things we don't do quite so well. That was a terrible dive. I can't believe legs like wide open like that. Or I can't believe you've got such terrible shoes on. Not said in an unkind way, but it's almost a reminder that we all share fallibilities which we can all identify with without feeling as if somehow it's a stain on our character.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's like a very long traffic jam. There is a perverse pressure. It's irritating you may be sitting in a traffic jam for whatever reason, but you look in your rear view mirror, and you see they're 3 miles behind you, and you're a little bit smarter than them, because of course you're a little bit further ahead in the queue, but in the meantime, schmuckers you off taking the wrong route, or not realising there was a diversion, there's a pleasure in somehow sharing it with other people too.
Yeah.
And I just feel somehow the pursuit of excellence at all costs is very overrated. I think it's about finding points of connection which we can identify with.
Yes, and maybe in a meal setting, we can over time allow our guard down a bit. We can share these weaknesses and we can connect in a way.
Other people reveal them anyway. People reveal them without realizing it, but people overthink and overanalyze and create all kinds of doomsday scenarios. My God, if I come in on the left-hand side, the shadow won't be very favorable, and my hair's too dry. My God, people have more things to worry about than that. But nevertheless, yes, I think it's about creating an environment people feel as though they fit. Not they have to be the subject matter expert, or necessarily the wittiest and cleverest person in the room, but somehow where they feel they're among people they identify with on whatever level. And that's very important indeed. I just feel, the notion of gathering together has become less and less pronounced with the advent of technology and social media. There are people in large organizations who could very easily meet for a coffee, but choose to send a message via text or WhatsApp. Even though they are not in another town, they are maybe 150 yards away.
Maybe at the other end of the desk.
Maybe that as well.
Yes.
Maybe that as well. And I think that it's a problem in society generally.
Yeah.
That people are afraid to stand and say, hang on, no, that's wrong. Why are we doing it that way? That makes no sense. I mean, it may be a brilliant new idea and so forth, but actually it doesn't make sense for us. The fear of saying something out of turn is very powerful. And therefore people would rather say nothing than upset the apple cart.
And you were saying earlier that perhaps one of the reasons why people are feeling more anxious about saying the wrong thing is because this sense of we're being recorded. Our digital lives are out there. And so people are more wary. Whereas I suppose in an offline setting, there isn't perhaps so much of a fear.
I think that's right. I think people are generally much more exposed. I think the fact is that wherever you go, you are under surveillance. Now, you don't actually know it, but people don't advertise it. By the way, so if you're on the tube this afternoon, on the way to Heathrow Airport, there'll be cameras trained on carriages 1, 3, 7 and 5. No, that doesn't happen at all. But one way or another, you can be reasonably sure, whether through a drone or a satellite or somebody else's unobtrusive footage, you are featured. In most cases, it will make no difference to you whatever. But nevertheless, there is a sense you are unable to live your life incognito should you choose. Everything somewhere is recorded, and that becomes the problem. Now, of course, unless you're going to live on a desert island or somewhere suitably remote, the fact of the matter is it's inescapable. The question really is, at what point does it become so intrusive that you start to lose any sense of your own boundaries? And I'm a big believer in setting boundaries, whereby I'm not terribly interested in being part of social media. LinkedIn, which is fine. Otherwise, I think most of it really is very hit and miss. I think that some things have value. There's no question at all when there have been major incidents. Twitter was a very, very effective means whereby message could be spread very quickly and very powerfully across the world. But the problem you have in a way is that the reliance upon technology, particularly personal technology, is so overwhelming that people forget what it is that made them human in the first place. And that really is the nub of the issue. We all communicated perfectly well face to face for thousands of years before digital media ever showed up. Perfectly well. And cities were created, and revolutions were won, and inventions were made, and people traveled, whether by plane or boat or even on foot for that matter. But somehow there was a physical dimension to it. And I think, unfortunately, in the modern world, which is obsessed with the idea that progress should be measured largely in terms of speed and efficiency, and I'm not sure that's necessarily right. Progress is not always progressive, sadly. It sounds a bit of a contradiction in terms, but progress is not always progressive. And the desire to do something quickly, as though somehow there's a deadline. I wasn't aware. We got to be done by 4:30 this afternoon. No, surely not. I often tell the story of the farmer who 100 years ago wants to get a handle on how to deal with the vicissitudes of the weather and how the seasons may be changing, would put his hat and coat on, and he would walk to his neighbour for a chat. His neighbour would be 5 miles away. And of course, along the journey, the farmer would observe the weather conditions, he'd look at the crops, all the animals running out of the hedges and so forth, which way the wind was blowing, think about maybe what he did last year, what he could do this time more efficiently. And he finally arrived at his neighbour's house 5 miles away. They sit on the veranda, no doubt, have a glass of lemonade, and talk about the way of the world, problems and opportunities and so forth. And then he walked back 5 miles, contemplating what he'd learned from meeting his neighbour, what he's seen on the journey over, what he might see on the journey back. Now, unfortunately, although I exaggerate the point slightly, there's a lack of thought and reflection in the modern world. People are in too much of a hurry. And I think that many people will be a lot happier if they didn't feel as though somehow they were on the proverbial hamster wheel. Now, I've written a book, I mentioned before, all about the offline philosophy. It's coming out later in the year. And in it, I refer to a particular subject which you will be aware of, and I'm sure everybody else watching this as well. FOMO.
Yes.
Fear of missing out. I wrote a chapter in my book called LOMO, Love of Missing Out. Didn't invite me? Oh, thank God for that. I can do my own thing. I stay in bed a bit longer. I can see my girlfriend, take the dog for a walk. How fantastic is that? But the idea somehow there is a great party going on, there's an event going on, there's a parade, there's a coronation, and you weren't invited, you weren't included? What kind of schmuck are you? And over here, you're saying, very big schmuck over here. I don't want to go, don't send me an invitation. I don't want to see the aftermath, the photographs, I don't care. But I think I'm in a minority there. And a lot of people do care. And they care in a sense because the fear of not actually being a part of something, the fear of somehow being in seclusion, not because you were happy in your own company. Why? You're a bit of a loser. You've got no friends. If you had friends, you'd be at the coronation, you'd be at the event, you'd be at the game, whatever it may be, you're not. If you said something, actually I had a wonderful day, which I often do, what did I do? I read my books. Nobody phoned me. I didn't go anywhere. I had no plan. I read one book, I read another book. Then I went out for a bit, had a shower, came back, read more, went out for whatever it may be. But I did it on my own. And being on your own has much to recommend it. As the farmer may have told you on his walk to and from his neighbour.
Yes.
When you are on your own, you have time to think. Now, what's very interesting to me is on the tube in London, it is fascinating. You were talking before about the chocolate challenge I had filmed on, well, a few of them, but the original idea was to do that on the tube. The reason I didn't do it on the tube is, first of all, because
maybe you should explain to people what the chocolate challenge is.
That is also possible, but also they can look at it themselves, or you can tell them yourself. The chocolate challenge basically was where I was filmed in Baker Street, in Marylebone High Street, in actually Pall Mall. And the idea was I would be standing in the street with a big box of chocolates, and I would offer a chocolate to anybody who came past me who was not online. In other words, not on their phone, not with a headset on, not looking at some film, actually engaging with a friend, walking a dog, eating an apple, whatever it may be, just regular without being obsessed with somehow being up to the minute in every respect. Now, that concept I like. And I like it because actually what it says is that I am my own person. I'm not interested in what people are doing, the fashion, the popular thread and so forth. What was interesting about the particular process, the chocolate challenge, was the fact that most people were very engaged by it. People started to talk, what is it about, and some people much appreciate the chocolates, particularly small people. And of course, it's great when you saw little kids, 4, they're 5, and they're burrowing in there. I got orange ones. Where's the green one? Where's the green? Putting more out. You go to my friends and so forth. But it was great the way because it created interaction. And then the mum's got involved. Someday with a robot to come over. That to me is a wonderful thing. But nobody worried too much about, saying, well, I'm standing on the wrong side, therefore, saying, I'll prefer to come around the back. You film it that way. People just did it for the pleasure of doing so. And I think that's a very important point. Spontaneity, living in the moment, not worrying about somehow you'll be judged or given a mark out of 10. And the offline chocolate challenge is, I think, emblematic of it. Now, what's what you were talking about before? I think you've forgotten what it was. So
you're talking about the chocolate challenge. You were first going to do it on the tube.
Oh yes, the tube. Okay. Well, thank God you were following. Okay. The whole thing about the tube was I was going to do the chocolate challenge on the tube because, of course, there you have very, very big compartments and certain lines are all contiguous. It's all one long thing. It's all connected rather than individual carriages. And I was going to have it filmed on the tube. The problem was you need to get permission and they charge you. The London Underground will charge you to use the line, even if it's in a quiet part of the day. And at the time I thought, that's nonsense, I don't want to do that at all. But nevertheless, the reason that the tube was interesting to me is because, in fact, on the tube, if you look, certainly in a relatively busy compartment, you will find almost everybody is engaged on some mobile device.
Yeah.
The number of people who are actually reading a newspaper, God forbid, a book, talking to their friends, maybe just thinking, maybe they're reciting poetry for all I know, it doesn't matter. Compare the number of people actually on a device, I'd be generous to call it 20%, probably less. And that is very alarming. Why is it such a major impediment? People say, hello, good morning. Or hello, goodbye. What's wrong with that? But it's interesting. The one thing which emerged with the chocolate challenge was that there was the odd person who did feel something slightly sinister going on. Is there some kind of plot here?
What's in these chocolates?
Yes, am I going to be named and numbered here? Is there going to be some negative consequence? Now, on the tube, there are certain people who you talk to and they turn around as though somehow they're astonished that you are addressing them rather than somebody over their shoulder. As if the idea of just regular communication was something which was complete anathema to them. Talk to people? What kind of crazy idea is that? And yet, you think, hang on a second, no. Most places, it was a simple courtesy to say, good morning. You don't tip your hat. I'm probably not one to wear anyway, but you know what I'm trying to say. You don't have to go to the extreme, but say hello, good morning, or, in a very innocuous way. Some people do respond very well.
Yes.
Now, the other thing I was going to say very quickly is relevant to this in a slightly different context. I was talking about before. There is one incredibly powerful emotional tool we have at our disposal as human beings, which is all too infrequently used in my experience. And that's, of course, and you're about to exhibit it right now, smiling. Smiling Richard is an incredibly powerful tool in terms of what it says about you, the feelings of warmth it induces in your counterpart, and the fact that somehow once you smile, you are saying to somebody, I'm leaning into the conversation, I'm interested in you as a person. That's all. I've no idea what we'll talk about next, but I'm interested, I'm leaning in, I want to feel as though somehow there's a connection and there's an embrace. That's all it is. Now, it's not like I want to embrace everybody on the tube, obviously not, I'm not big enough arms, but you understand the point.
Yes.
Why is it somehow people will view that as a threat? Is it because it's a public space and because they have become very, very much governed by the potential threat of some lunatic with a knife or somebody who's maybe sneeze all over you and give you coronavirus? Well, yes, life is a risk. Like I said before, if you are going to take a role on, if you can provide absolute guarantees, the truth of the matter is that's not realistic. Life doesn't work that way, wherever you live, frankly. Nothing is certain at all.
Yes.
But I feel in some ways a lack of certainty is a good thing. Because when you are not so certain about either your surroundings, the people you're with, you pay more attention. And I have found that, unfortunately, when people are in a comfort zone of familiarity, they don't pay much attention. They go through the motions. When you are taken out of your comfort zone, maybe a different place, a different language, people look a bit strange, people's names you can't pronounce properly, you just pay more attention. I don't think in the modern world people pay enough attention, whether in business or in a personal context.
Yes. Well, I suppose we're somehow losing our ability to maintain attention on a thing, partly perhaps because of our online worlds, because we have this constant stimulation, and as soon as we start to feel bored, we can click onto the next profile or the next news feed, or we can keep scrolling. So we're losing an ability to keep our attention on one thing. Like you say, read a book, right? I've got to sit down, I'm no good distractions. I've only got the book to entertain me,
But I don't think you need to necessarily have what I would call a defined plan. It's not as I'm going to read the book,
Yes.
and I'm going to read 10 chapters, and I'm going to write a report on it. Nobody asks you to do that. Just read. Frankly, read a book of photographs, all I care. A book of essays. It can be short, it can be poetry. It's not the way it is. It's just the fact that it does require a certain effort. And most people don't want to make an effort. Most people are very inherently lazy. Another issue you've got to deal with, both in corporate life and professionally. Not to say they're bad people, not to say they haven't got ability, but they're inherently lazy. And I think that it's difficult somehow to raise your game, do things differently. In one of those situations, I'm sure you come across in your corporate world, how young people supplant old people. And young people come with fresh ideas, energy, vigor, maybe a little bit, should we say, avant-garde in their thinking, which is good in my view. But where you are pushing that person in front of another who is maybe 25 years older, far more senior in terms of age, remuneration, experience, and so forth, and actually you find the young individual is twice as smart. That's a problem. Not for the young individual, of course. The older, experienced, mature person who is, I would say, more comfortable being listened to, acknowledged, respected, all which are justified, but not for their own sake alone. You've got to continually, I always say to people, tell people in big businesses, when you're running a big company, the most important thing you can do as a CEO, anything, forget the operating business, groom your successor. Grooming your successor, who will build on your legacy, the right skills for the modern age, hugely important. Because, of course, the nature of business, the nature of communication, the nature of integration is going to change hugely even in the next 5 years. And have you got the right person? I don't think, in fact, that it's necessarily about people who got the right blend of operational skills. I think that in a way it can be done by people remotely. It's about the kind of leadership you provide. Now, it's interesting. I was approached a little while ago by my old school. Good school. And they were going through a process whereby they were choosing a new headmaster. And they approached the alumni network to say, thoughts, you got any ideas? And I came back and said that two things. Number one, I don't personally think you should be looking for somebody who is a scholar par excellence. Great if you can get one. But what matters most of all is you look ahead 20 years into the future. And what will be really, really important, I think, is not actually your intellectual capacity, though that has its place. It'll be the ability to empathize and engage with people in a world dominated by technology. And you need somebody coming in as the headmaster who reflects those sensibilities. It'd be great, no doubt, if somebody could recite Latin verse backwards or found some incredibly complicated algorithm and know that win a prize. No question at all. And I applaud that. But what's even more important is the ability to actually engage and to communicate in a world which is dominated by the digital mind. I said, on top of that, going a stage further, the breadth of the school, in terms of its profile, its history, its network, the world at large, I think it's too big, in fact, for a very highly qualified academic. I said, what you really need, in my view, you need a CEO. You need a CEO to run the whole thing, and you bring an outstanding team of teachers, whatever level, to come in from different disciplines. They thanked me very much for my observations. I'm not sure they actually acted upon them, because in fact, in the end, I discovered, in fact, that the new headmaster was a woman, mistress, and I have no idea whether she took on the role of CEO, but I don't think she has. But it's interesting to me because I think that the big question is whether certain management are fit for purpose in the modern age in terms of the demands of business and demands of consumers, people they serve. And I'm not sure they always are.
So you think this is about, you think that the ability to empathize and engage is going to be much more important?
Yes.
And I suppose that's why you're saying in that case that a CEO with those skills of being able to build a team, grow a team, is potentially more important than the technical excellence of the teacher in that case.
Yes,
right.
Yes, I think that the CEO is not there to demonstrate his or her operational excellence. That's what you've got teachers for.
Yes.
It's like saying, it's like a football manager. You want a football manager who actually is not only a great tactician, also a great man manager, also knows which combination of players to play in a certain game.
Yes.
Not to play the game itself, but choosing the right players in terms of their profile, their background, their form, other factors, hugely important. And I think actually in business, you may have your own view, maybe people may of course disagree with me, I'm sure they will actually at some point, but the fact of the matter is I think that element will become more and more critical in businesses and large organizations, and indeed smaller, as the years go by.
And so that's a fascinating paradox, isn't it? On the one hand, as our world digitizes, there will be more and more of a premium. I mean, we automate more and more of I suppose, our lives. In terms of what's valuable set of skills is going to be this ability to relate to other human beings. And yet that very technology is intruding on our ability to develop those skills.
Yeah, but see, the irony is that the greatest technology of all is actually the technology of thought and technology of speech. You see, the brain is the greatest piece of technology ever invented. The brain supersedes everything you could possibly think of. I'm sure there are men in white coats in a lab somewhere saying, no, you got it all wrong. This will be the deal breaker to end all deal breaker. But no, the greatest piece of technology, in my view, is the brain. And the brain has given us two very great gifts. The ability to speak as humans, not something which you see in animals, albeit they've got their own version of it, and the ability to listen. You show with animals, but of course, listening and then interpreting what you listen and acting on it are two different things. But I think to myself that yes, the technology is great, no question at all, extraordinary advances made in selective areas. I mentioned before, medical technology, incredible. Last 25 years, what's been achieved? Flight booking systems, but you just tap in where you want to go and just up it comes, and you're off ready to get. Wonderful. But I think that on a practical basis, what matters most of all is the ability to engage. And I think although technology does have its merits, it is really in a personal context designed to be an adjunct, not a replacement for what's gone before. And I think the ability to think for yourself even say, guess what? I want to think about it. I'll come back to you. If it's somebody else. Is a suggestion somehow that you're not quite up with events. And I would say, funny enough, yes, I'm absolutely up with events, but I want to actually sample them slowly. I don't feel as though somehow I'm in a competition whereby I've got to give the definitive answer in 45 minutes. Yeah. Maybe I'll sleep on it. Maybe I'll think about it. Maybe I'll take a little bit off the end, add a bit more over there, do something differently next month. But I think that the brain is the greatest piece of technology we as humans can ever hope to utilize. And yet somehow it's almost regarded as just there. Just there, for the ride. Yeah, like your feet. Your feet, you come in the body, okay, you got things on the end, they help you walk, so it's quite handy. But brain, what's it there to do? Well, okay, fine. Notionally, it helps you think or hold yourself upright or hold the right knife and fork. Yes, obviously. There are many aspects of the brain. I'm not remotely expert in these things, but I just know it's an incredibly complex organ, and it has an ability to change lives in a way that technology is not able in quite the same way. See, technology is really an enabler, but it still requires human input to be effective. And I just feel somehow that people get things the wrong way around, as though somehow technology comes first. Technology is the answer to everything. It's not the answer to everything. Sometimes there is no answer to everything. Whether it's coming from technology or your own brain, there's no answer. There's no obvious answer at this minute. And I just feel somehow the idea that, you come to the table. I said before, the fact you could sit down and play Mendelssohn, or the fact you're saying, I'm going to race you. Would you at the end of Gloucester Place, the end of the road here, you're saying, by the time I got there, I've broken the world record. No, of course you won't. You might be a bit faster than you think, but you will not break any world record. But never, there's a competitive spirit with everybody. But for a lot of people, it's very much suppressed. Only rises when encouraged within certain conditions. Other people are pressed about everything. As you said before, get my sandwich in 10 minutes back to my office. 10 minutes, my God, yes, I can beat that. I can get the queue on the end where that guy's a bit more efficient. Yes, and I can prove to the people down the court, crazy. But there are people like that, sadly.
Yes.
And I think to myself, why? Why are they like that? Why do you behave in that way? What is it you're trying to achieve? Or is your life so bankrupt in other respects that you actually attach undue importance to that? Maybe.
Right. Well, that could be an analysis of many companies that have gone.
Maybe.
That have gone under because they've obsessed on these particular factors. Maybe it's efficiency and maybe it's top line. They've lost sight of really what's binding a company together and what it's purpose for.
I think one problem you have, of course, is when you are publicly quoted, particularly, it's a very problem in America with they're reporting quarterly as well. Here, less so, but again, there are different levels of scrutiny. But there are a lot of companies I think would be much better if they were private, where they could actually look long term, where they didn't have shareholders to answer to, and where the banks, I suspect, will take a slightly more favourable view because they're not going to be influenced by what the analyst says for this quarter or the next. But I think, again, you see there are people who go public for the wrong reasons. I think there's a kudos having a public company, be able to issue shares to buy businesses and so forth. Not the worst idea in the world, but you have to question as to what other benefit may lie there, and is it actually appropriate? You can raise money privately. It's not as straightforward, but it's not difficult. Who you're talking to, depends how you ask. But I just feel in the public arena, there are too many businesses who are too exposed because they are looking to perform under the radar of a select group of people who are often very unforgiving. And I think that's another thing which I come back to. The world generally is an unforgiving place. One thing I noticed, you might have seen actually one of the chocolate challenges I did on the offline videos. I got chatting to one of the biggest shoe vendors on Marylebone High Street. Whenever I see somebody selling a big issue,
and for people internationally, that's the the publication that homeless people sell in the UK.
Yeah, and it's a way of getting them on their feet and making a little income. It'll sort of certain and so forth. People, all kinds of reasons, to be on the street. Sometimes their own fault. Sometimes a bit unlucky. Circumstances often dictate that. The number of people I see walk past the vendor as if he or she didn't exist. Not an acknowledgement, not a hello, not a raised eyebrow, not I'll buy one tomorrow. Nothing. And I find that quite shocking. It's a very small thing, but it does say to me that there's a fundamental lack of humanity. Is it somehow that they are threatened by these people? Is it the fact that somehow they feel they're unclean, or somehow they deserve to be where they are? I'm not sure. I'm not making any statement on that. But it is quite shocking to see people walk past as though somehow they had an untrammeled view and this person was not part of the picture. And it's actually very, very shocking that people can behave. Now, I'm not saying it's so bad here compared with other countries. Probably every country has good or bad in that regard. I don't think that the British are any more or less kind than any other nation. It's funny how people often have a stereotype. I remember having a conversation with a friend of mine, in different context, who's Irish. He said, you've got to understand, the Irish do family like no one else in the world. I said, really? What? You mean more than the Italians? I mean, give me a break. Everyone, the Americans, the Argentinians, maybe not Japanese, but most nations, they are warm and they're open and they're hospitable, they want to be with you or they want to share. Please don't tell me that the Irish have got some kind of special formula which makes them a bit different. No, they don't. They don't at all. And I think, again, because of what I said before, there's far more that connects us and separates us. Most people, Richard, wherever they go, are warmly greeted. But if you're a stranger, somewhere out of town, most people want to do the right thing by their own neighborhood, their own circle, their own country, their own flag, their own whatever. And I think, again, there is a great virtue in finding those points of convergence rather than divergence. As I said before, I'm very happy to go to a cafe like the Pancreas at the Inn with a communal table where I sit down and I make a point next to somebody who is on their own or being part of a group, and if appropriate, start chatting. Now, somebody's not welcome, which means I go away, which is fine, but somebody is very welcome, and people reveal all kinds of things about themselves.
Yeah. But this links back to what you're saying. To find this convergence, it's often easier to find it in our weaknesses. And that's what we don't expose online. Like we tend to curate our online presence in a way that we don't when we've built trust with somebody one-to-one. And
yes, except on the chocolate challenge, of course, people were showing their weaknesses, as was I. So in a way, I was reflecting on people. They did not do something as well as they might have done. They did not actually embrace the world beyond. They were in their own world, which is why they're looking at a screen or on a headset and so forth. I think you see weakness is a good thing. Weakness actually invites us to look at ourselves in a rather more balanced way.
Yeah.
I think the pursuit of excellence is, as I said before, very overrated. I mean, okay, great, you've made $400 trillion last year, but I mean, and I can remember very well, somebody came to an offline dinner a few years ago, didn't know him very well. He was actually the husband of somebody else. And he was a successful guy, clearly in the financial markets. And somebody asked him, what's your background? Where are you from? He basically, in one very long sentence, where I'm not even sure he drew breath, provided his life story as to how he got to where he was, how brilliant he was, how much money he made, and so forth. And at the very end of that, I said to him, and now tell me something interesting about you. But that wasn't remotely interesting. So you're giving me a laundry list of achievements. I mean, okay, well done. Fine. You're not missing money. You're very clever. All right, now let's go and get the kind of guts of it. Tell me anything you're bad at. That's much more interesting. Tell me about that terrible faux pas you committed when you went back to your old school. Or you farted at some terrible. That's all we want to hear about. That's what makes life interesting. Hearing something you won the award, 7th year in a row. Oh God, not you again. Yeah. You're probably more polite than me.
I probably am.
Yeah, probably are. So I don't mind terribly much about put my hand up and say, who are you? What I thought she was dead. But the truth is that people are very, very worried about the fact that maybe some terrible consequence. You can always Jerry, smooth over a misunderstanding or a sharp word. But the problem you have is that most of these gatherings we're talking about, people are engaged in a very bland conversation. It's not confrontational. It's not actually any way designed to somehow energize people. It's about not making mistakes. I like making mistakes, not bad, but not big mistakes. I don't want to make a mistake where it's, oh my God, I've sort of run somebody over. That's a very big mistake, But where I said something out of turn, or I misunderstood what they were saying. But you can use it as a device to draw people out. And that's also a good thing. I just feel somehow that it's a reminder of our fundamental humanity. I think, people do. I'll tell you quite a funny story, which actually I'll relate at the offline dinner you're going to. A true story. I hosted a dinner on behalf of a big technology company called Salesforce.
Yes.
And they wanted to get close to their clientele without selling anything. And so I'll tell you what, I'll invite 20 odd people on my side, random bunch of people I know, myself, Kieran, fellow over the road, wherever it may be. And you invite some people on your side. Clients, senior management. I'll mix them all up, I'll create the whole thing for you. Anyway, it went very well. One of their clients I became very friendly with. And he was, in fact, at the time, the marketing director of The Economist, magazine. I was the client of Salesforce, and he said, look, they dropped me a line, they invited me as their guest, and I was free that evening as it happens, and he said, I pitched up. He said, I really had no idea what the hell was going on. So they invited me, and I got the address, and I went. He said, sat down at my table. There were always round tables, people move around and so forth. He said, you've got to understand, when I go to events, typically, they are populated by the great and the good. And there are workshops, and there are seminars, and everything is organized, and there are biographies and agendas. He said, frankly, everything is prepped to within an inch of its life. He said, interesting, maybe on an intellectual level, but it's actually a bit dull after a while. He said, I pitched up at the offline dinner, sat down. I found the fellow to my left, he was running a hedge fund. The lady on my right, she was a piano teacher. The fellow opposite me on the side table, he was running a dog walking business. He said, nobody cared what I did at The Economist. And he said, it was the most wonderfully liberating moment. Nobody cared about my status, my position, how much money I made. He said, I, as in I, the individual, not I, the marketing executive, was immeasurably more interesting. And whether it was about where I got on a holiday last time, or whether I had a particular addiction to, I don't know, lobster, it doesn't matter what it was. And in a way, it was very revealing to me that somebody who came from a very senior role was quite so openly admitting that, in fact, the very formulaic approach of most business-related events, and I dare say professional events, you may say, for example, it could be a bunch of doctors or institutes getting together, but where there was a false formality. And I don't really care about that kind of thing. I'm prepared to take a chance, and I'm prepared to take a risk in terms of maybe who sits where, people have no connection with one another, whatever. And that's good as well. And I want people to be a little bit uncomfortable. Not unpleasantly so, but just to be a little bit more sensitive to surroundings, just a little bit more carefully. And I think that, in a way, for me, is a very key ingredient behind the success of offline. It's just the fact that, as I said to you before, I give people permission to be vulnerable. And once they realize, actually, other people are useless in their own way as well, suddenly all bets are off. People relax. That very much is the key.
Yes. And what you're saying there, and in fact what this marketing director has said of perhaps some of his more large-scale gatherings that he attended, I think is true. It's pervasively across businesses now. Just a standard meeting, I think it tends to be overly formalized, prepped to within an inch of its life, often before people show up.
And you squeeze all the soul out of it.
Yeah, and it's all quite stiff. Even the chairs are quite stiff sometimes. And you're sat in a way that doesn't feel comfortable. And to your point about not feeling some apprehension to have you pay attention, I think that's also true, because you know who's going to show up, you know what the agenda is.
You've done it before.
You've kind of got into a pattern around this type of meeting. There is no spontaneity, there is no serendipity, and I think that's why, and we're starting to see that shift in business culture, where people are getting much more intentional about facilitating workshops in a particular way, where we do spark interest and we do mix things up and we do get people moving around. But I think in large part right now, business ceremony is very formulaic.
It's very interesting, if you said to one of your clients, guess what, we're having a meeting, but not in the office. Maybe wait for the weather a bit better. We're going to meet in the park. In fact, we're going to have a picnic in the park. Right, okay. I'm bringing the wine, you sort the food out, he'll bring the rug and so forth. And when we all get there, we'll find a big oak tree. Eventually see, first of all, how people sit down. Who waits for the CEO to sit down first? How gracefully he does it or not? You know? Who insists on being on their phone and being out of it because they're so self-important they can't be able to help and so forth? Who helps bring the rug out? Who's got an extra umbrella case or a parasol maybe because the weather's very warm? You learn about people. Again, it doesn't require you anything very radical or unusual, except that you change the setting. A dozen people, a management team, whatever it may be, maybe a couple of younger people, because of course you want them to feel as though they are also valued, they are the future, and actually their voices are arguably more important than that of senior management. You know senior management, I think we've stuck with it 5 bazillion times already. Younger people, absolutely. But when you're in that kind of environment, Richard, I think very instructive, maybe you do it and someone tell me how it goes, with client A or B, a dozen people, whether it's in London or somewhere else, but in a park, and you sit, you talk, you don't talk about business at all. Business in a way is the least important thing. It's about the gathering of people. And once you're there, talk about food for like it. Talk about, what else you enjoy outside. Or whether it is, frankly, cycling, or whether it is taking the dog for a walk, or whether it's climbing mountains, doesn't matter a great deal. I don't care. But I think you will find that people will become much more, accepting of the frailties of others when they are viewed in that environment. You see, when you are sitting around a boardroom table, I'll tell you an interesting story. Years ago, I was involved with a company. I was the chairman, in fact, for some time. And they were going through quite a fast expansion, and the caliber of people rose commensurately. And I was asked, as part of the sort of the process, to try and provide a second or third opinion on people who made it to a certain stage. And I would very often not meet them in the boardroom at all. So in the boardroom, there is a kind of protocol, there's an order of play, there's a perceived etiquette, and in a way, it's all very scripted. And I didn't want that. So I would say to certain people, meet me at restaurant X. She's no longer with us, sadly, because they closed down, but good restaurant, but a restaurant you couldn't book. And moreover, you have to share a table, perhaps. I was always fascinated to see who said please and thank you to the waitress. Who said to the neighbour, who obviously didn't know before, please pass the salt, runs a lunge at the table for it. Who had dirty fingernails, with food down their front? Or who actually, interestingly enough, in one particular case I remember, who had a voice which somehow careered over the hubbub of the restaurant. Very posing, very powerful voice, interesting in a different way. Accidentally on purpose, again, I might say to the old friend, by the way, I'll be at restaurant X around 2:30. If you're nearby, just swing by for a coffee or a glass of wine or whatever. I want to get your quick impression of this individual. And more to the point, I want to see how they respond to you as a sudden interloper in a private conversation. And believe me, it's very revealing. I learned a great deal about people there and then, because actually, in the end, your professional credentials are important, but not that important. Your personal skills, ability to engage, ability to adapt, ability to empathize, hugely important. And they'll become more so as time passes. And I think, again, we're talking about, certainly my experiences are in the West. Whether one's having the same conversation, for example, right now in China, or in the Congo, or in Brazil. I mean, I don't know. Maybe they are, maybe they're not. I suspect they are to a degree, but I think there are always going to be differences which are a consequence of culture, background, history, climate, whatever it may be. But I can never see that in the world going forward, there will be more convergence, but the convergence will be based upon, I think, a set of values rather than necessarily pure professional competence. You'll find companies will attract people of a certain caliber. And I think people of a certain caliber don't have to be necessarily the greatest expert in their field, but by definition, as we said before, when you don't know or you're not sure, you ask questions. In other words, they will attract people who are humble, people who are curious, people who don't accept the status quo just because it's been there for 4 million years. And I think that's very, very valuable. And I think in the modern age, you're going to see much, much more of it. I think in a way, you see it in a different way through activism. People become much more engaged, much more vocal. And I think sometimes it's a very good effect. Partly because of technology, which is a very good reason for technology in a way. The problem I have with technology is, unfortunately, people become far too reliant upon it. So somehow, I remember something came offline, a young guy, 23, 24, he's had a wonderful evening. The most amazing thing of all, I managed to get through the evening for 3 hours looking at my phone once. I mean, wow, yes, that's a celebration.
Yes.
I mean, in a way, I was very pleased, and also quite sad.
Yes. But I can relate to that because I certainly have got a level of addiction to my phone, and so sometimes it does feel like an achievement to have put that addiction aside.
But do you actually? I mean, but when you're addicted, I mean, is it with you all the time?
It's with me most of the time, and I always think it's an achievement when I manage to put it in the drawer when I'm at home and stay off it for 24 hours. There's definitely a level of addiction.
Do you reward yourself?
It's probably not as much. I mean, I might say to myself, "Oh, well done," but no. Not,
do your kids reward you?
Well, they're not young. They're too young to understand. But I can certainly relate to that guy celebrating he got through 3 hours. Yes.
Interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, what is your attitude towards your kids are very small, but what's your attitude towards their embrace of technology?
Well, I want to be very careful with it, and I think what's interesting to me is it's creating the environment where these skills get developed almost automatically, right? Because when I think about empathy skills, listening skills, and some of the conversational skills, my mind tends to think about, okay, well, this is something we need to train people in, right? This is training courses, and the companies need to have this as part of their programs, right? Mm-hmm. But really what you're talking about is you put them in an environment, they'll develop these skills, right? If they sit down for lunch every day on a table where they don't know the same people every day, they're going to learn conversational skills. They're going to hear stories. They're going to learn to empathize. So it's as much about skills to acquire as it is about a culture to develop. And
I think you're right. I think it's interesting. I think that there are many examples I could look at. I mean, I spend a lot of time looking at young people, maybe as a group, maybe at the bus stop, whatever it may be, and it's almost as though the technology is a crutch. If they didn't have it, they somehow fall over. They don't have it, somehow they have no means of communicating with the outside world.
Yes.
It's what I said before about the brain through the mode of speech and hearing providing the greatest gift of all.
Yes, and of course, whilst it's an immense informational resource, unseen in history, right? This ability to tap into the internet, it's also potentially a factor that has us lose our ability to use the greatest organ of all, the brain, as you say. Because if we're constantly wired in to this dopamine hit of the social channels, then we're losing this
How was our
ability to
dopamine effect activated before mobile phones came along?
Well, I suppose, yes, that's a very good question. And it probably was like acquiring the attention of our friends by telling a good story or empathizing with somebody and being rewarded in some way. Yeah. So we would have got dopamine, and I mean those circuits existed to encourage pro-social.
Is dopamine a 21st century phenomenon? It didn't exist before 1999. I don't know. But it's interesting how it just has such a transformative effect. It would seem. What is it about dopamine rather than anything else, which actually has such a pronounced effect.
Well, yes, and I'm not a neuroscience. I'm using that as a shorthand for whatever that addictive mechanism is. But it certainly exists.
It is interesting. If suddenly, and it may happen yet, let's just say there is a massive global outage whereby internet goes down. I mean, it's just gone. I mean, you can do what you like. You may back up and say, "Well, it's gone." What are you going to do? Yeah, I mean, seriously. I'll be fine, and you'll probably be fine as well. But I'm looking at the general population. What happens next? Where do I go? I can't look up my maps. I can't look at a clock because, of course, now nobody's got to watch anymore because, of course, there's a clock on the thing.
I've got no idea how to ask directions.
That's right. And it's interesting if you think about it. Okay, it may happen. I mean, I don't think it was all very well talking about coronavirus. Coronavirus is frankly a pipsqueak problem. I mean, it's serious. It's essentially a strain of flu. It's just very contagious. If, for example, somebody said, "Guess what? You know something? We've actually we've hijacked the grid. There's no electricity anymore. I mean, it's just gone. What are we going to do?" So not only can you not refrigerate anything, nor are the trains functioning, nor for that matter, have you got any connectivity. Then what? You mean I've got to talk to him? Ask him for... Oh my... No, I can't do that. Well, you can. Of course you can do that. But I think to myself, is it going to take something of a cataclysmic... I hope not. I like to think, actually, that most people, when put on the spot, they say, "Yes, you're right. I was a bit lazy, I was a bit weak, I followed everybody else, seemed like a good idea at the time," all the usual reasons, most of which I can identify with. I've probably been lazy and weak and so on and so forth myself many times. We all have. But I think that the problem today is that the technology is always seen as some kind of a solution. Whatever imperfections I may have, what I'm not very good at, what I can be better at, say, well, the technology will somehow save my life. There'll be some device, there'll be some app which somehow will give me a route to the golden path I must follow. And I don't think it really exists in quite that way. There is a golden path, but it is not exclusively digital. And I think actually digital is only going to work well when you have people with the right level of empathy to guide us along the right lines.
Yes. The future will not be digitized.
Okay, I think it will be to a degree. I mean, I'm probably the most non-technical person you'll ever interview. So, in a way, I come at it slightly from the point of view of maybe what you might call the idiot savant, where I'm so far removed from it that actually it almost gives me license to ask incredibly stupid questions. It's like looking at art. People say, is that the right way up? Yeah, of course it's the right way up. Yeah, but you ask a question. It's a pretty reasonable question to ask if you're unfamiliar. But I think it's also important not to feel intimidated to such a point where actually you feel, hang on a second, wasn't that famous case about the Korean airliner? Do you remember this? Maybe not. Korean airliner is basically going, but it was flying somewhere. There was a problem. Clearly a problem with the controls, with some device there, and because of the nature of South Korean society and the very deep acknowledgement of hierarchy and so forth, the number 2, number 3 officer, wherever it was, the navigator, did not feel he could tell the lead pilot, we've got a problem with the altitude, or whatever it may be, because he felt it was not appropriate, and he would therefore lose some sense of personal honor, or he would be insulting maybe the status of the pilot and his peers and so forth. What happened? He didn't say anything, they all crashed and everybody died. Now, what kind of crazy thinking could induce any right-minded person acting that way? Except for the fact that an extreme desire to obey authority. Although, I'm not suggesting one does that routinely in businesses, nevertheless, the fear of challenging the status quo, I think, is actually a very big negative, and it reflects very badly on management of some very senior individuals in large organizations.
Well, yeah, and there's a lot of research. In fact, we had Amy Edmondson from Harvard on the show, and she's done a lot of the pioneering research on psychological safety, and precisely what you're talking about, that phenomenon of people fearing speaking up. And she cites nurses in surgical settings and people on production lines, and she's done, looked into, but this is an issue that's prevalent across society. But also, if you can create psychological safety and you can create environments where people feel free to speak up, then you get better results, you get higher productivity, creativity, and so on.
Yes, but I think the problem in a way is, we said before about safety in numbers. You can have an individual conversation and people respond in an individual way, but you need some kind of momentum behind. You need to create a movement in a way, and to do that collectively is very hard. Bearing in mind history, culture, language, all the usual things, but nevertheless, one does have a sense that there should be some kind of international standard. There should be an international standard in terms of the way you behave, the way you treat people, the way you acknowledge them, and so forth. Okay, some people may bow a bit lower than me. I don't bow very low. I can't fall over that far. But some people are. I think what's saying, you prostrate yourself on the ground. I mean, it's enough. You stand up again. There's a halfway house. But I think that somehow there needs to be a shift in the way people perceive themselves and perceive the role of authority. What's authority there to do, actually? It's there to give direction, really, in a framework. But still there to be challenged. It's not as though somebody, it's there and will be untouched for the next 5,000 years. Really? According to whom exactly? Is there some individual, some directive has emerged, and this is the way we do things. Some people vote the same way. We've always been Labour. Labour since 1942. Oh my God, yes, we are now 80 years on. Things have changed. No. It's extraordinary. People have a fixation, in a way, and the fear of deviating from what they know, what is familiar, and what may cause some kind of opprobrium for their peer group is overwhelming.
Yeah, well, and we train it in from very young age, right? And I know that from my own children, right? That we train in deference to authority from a very young age.
But I think deference to authority is one thing, but it's also important to ask questions. Now, the issue is, if one says, okay, you can ask questions, but they must be within a certain framework. In other words, only questions allowed which are going to support the basic thesis. Really? Why would you say that? I mean, what kind of crazy thing is that? People do. Okay, yes, you can say things, and of course, and we make sure we run it via our publicists first, because we want to make sure nothing is untoward. I think, really? So what's going to happen here? It's amazing in a way how oversensitive people become to any perceived criticism. Seriously, I wrote an article about 3 years ago about Donald Trump before he got elected, incredible as it may seem, and it was requested by an American business publication. I can't remember exactly now who or what. Anyway, to cut a long story short, I wrote the thing, all fine, all proved and so forth, and of course, the election was getting closer and closer. They hadn't published it. And I thought, really, you've got to get it out soon, because really, otherwise, you lose your moment. Anyway, eventually, word gets back that they can't publish it because there are certain statements I have made which may be construed as very contentious, and they were very worried that publishers might be sued. I said, I'm sorry, I'm writing this at your request in a public vehicle, the publication it was, and you're saying to me, I didn't say anything which I would say was vulgar. I certainly mocked Trump, as he then was, but quite right too. If you are in the public gaze, you should expect a level of scrutiny, and whether you like it or not, it's nothing altogether. Obviously, politics, sport, and everything else, they have different opinions. Nothing wrong with that. But I remember very, very well, they basically said that we'll run it, we've got to excise some of this. Which they did. It probably should be here, I just put it all back in again. Just let it go. But yeah, it was, he is also very kind of, I don't know if you've got people watching this in America. Have you got American?
Yeah, we do have American viewers, listeners.
Have you got any Trump supporters? I don't know, that would be...
Well, quite possibly, yes.
Goodness me. How standards are dropped. I mean, I mean, I have to say, the one thing which I remember in the last election more than anything else was thinking to myself, how is it possible a country with such an abundance of resources and talent as America can produce two candidates of such a low quality in Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump? I say there's one reason for that: money. Because America's built on money and commerce, and that's really all they care about. You can talk about other things all you like, innovation and art and science, all great. In the end, it's all about the dollar. That's what they really care about most of all. And sadly, Trump, in many respects, represents the worst of America. Now, luckily for me, I'm not an American. So, although I go to America, it's a fine country in other ways, I don't have to suffer, for the most part, the nonsense he spouts. And not that I want to get involved in a political rant if it's not appropriate, but I would say that, I'm not hopeful that there will be another incumbent this time next year, but I do fear for an America that supports somebody of such low quality. Because that is a man who doesn't really have any empathy. Doesn't really care what you or I think. He's basically there to support one thing: himself. Now, it may well be along the journey, other people do benefit. But I don't follow the American political scene very carefully, but I remember one thing which was deeply shocking to me, which is when he demeaned the parents of a young man who'd won a Purple Heart for bravery action and killed, I think, in Iraq or Afghanistan, and he publicly belittled them at a rally, essentially to provide luster to his own kind of fanfare. And then subsequently, the way he treated John McCain. Again, I know John McCain, I knew he was an American war hero, and he was a very highly respected man by all sides of the establishment. To treat him as he did was appalling. And I thought to myself, really? America cannot do any better? I'm actually quite shocked. But I'm not sorry for another day.
Right, but it links. I suppose it links to. I suppose it leads to this other point that we were making about psychological safety, because there's two sides of this, isn't there? There's this ability to dissent, to question authority, your ability to criticize Trump, Trump's ability, I suppose, to criticize others, right? So this ability to allow dissent, but also having the fortitude to deal with that dissent, and ideally have a situation where we could all move forward together.
Look, on a practical basis, again, I'm not an expert on American politics. I only see what I observe on screen or when I read the newspaper and so forth. When you are the president or the leader of any nation, you do, by definition, represent all of the people. And Trump is a man who has divided his nation more than ever before. The irony is that he has achieved a relative degree of comfort at this point because of the fact that, so until recently, the stock market has been very, very strong. People have made money, jobs are increasing, a greater sense of security. The reality of the matter is actually that the economic cycle just favored him. It's happened that he took office at a time when the American economy was starting to turn. And the 7-year cycle was in full swing. It'll turn back again probably by 22. I think, what's going on right now. America's prospered in spite of Trump, not because of him. And yet most Americans, I think, are very, very insular. They don't really have a world view, which is a big problem. America once upon a time really was primus inter pares. It was a dominant nation. Now, still a very powerful nation, no question about that, but it's one of many. And America's got to really reposition itself in a new world. I'm not sure it's actually equipped to do that as well as it might. Now, again, my opinion, of course, I don't talk nonsense, but I sense, so everybody's been there, and I know a lot of people in America, all over. It is a country which is not happy. Below the surface, it's like a swan gliding serenely across the pond, but frantically kicking underneath. And that, to my mind, is something which reflects the state of America today.
Well, yes, and I think that, well, there's certainly I think there's been an increase in inequality there, hasn't there? Which we know historically raises tensions.
Increase
in inequality in the
sure.
income inequality, and that we know historically raises tensions in countries.
What's very interesting, actually, is that America has more people in prison than any nation in the developed world. Far more than in Russia, even China. The American level of incarceration is, I mean, I read the Pew Center, which is a very interesting source for all kinds of statistical information. Quite shocking. But of course, in America, you're probably aware, much of the prison system is privatized. It's run by companies. So all the things I said before about, the commercial aspect becomes very, very prominent again. And not that I want to go to the other extreme and live in a very, very kind of egalitarian society where everybody shares everything equally. No, that's not going to work either. You need to create an environment where people are rewarded for ambition and for risk and for taking a chance and for someone thinking differently. But I also feel that government somehow, I mean, it's almost as though it would be a rather interesting idea if one said to every world leader, okay, right, we're going to ask you to take a means test here. And the means test is to determine whether you've got the right qualities to lead anything, let alone a country. And the means test will be devised by people from around the world, and we will give you a mark out of 10 or 100, or whatever it may be. And we'll see exactly, maybe you will sit and you've got to write this on your own, under exam conditions, you've got half an hour, whatever, in a private room, we'll get all things together and see how you do. Now, it won't happen, of course, but it would be very interesting to see how people expose themselves once the auto cue is gone, once the script writer is actually behind the curtain and you are out there on your own.
Well, isn't there an argument to say that exists to a greater degree now than ever, because we've got this ability to see people, if you like, off camera, right, through people capturing them in social unguarded moments, hot mics,
but I think in a way,
camera phones and
yes, you can capture people in inappropriate situations, wherever it may be. But the idea that you are invited to almost reflect your own personal manifesto. 10 questions, Richard. Okay, what are the 3 values you most respect in other people? Which opponent did you most admire and why? What did you learn from that person? I mean, very interesting. Ask Trump. Okay, tell me people or maybe who are 3 great writers? Well, of course, Trump's case doesn't actually work. He never read a book, which of itself is quite shocking. You can have somebody who never read a book. I mean, literally never read a book. I mean, incredible in a way to me, in a way that you can't read anything from your Twitter feed, maybe, or Fox News. But there we go. But I think to somehow invite people as leaders to share their weaknesses. I mean, what are you going to be scared of? What, actually, you may find some of it's actually true. You are useless. You are, an ignoramus. You are ill-educated. You are antediluvian in some of your thoughts. Well, maybe you are. Okay. Now, some of these things may matter less than others, and that's fine. But I think what's important is people actually come clean and say, okay, this is what I stand for. I'm open about it. There's no subterfuge here. I'm open. It's like an open exam.
Yes, but I think that I think this really pertains to the cult of the leader, I believe.
A little bit.
And we create the cult of a leader in politics, we create the cult of a leader often in our corporations. And I think unless we change the system to the degree that we're no longer so reliant on our cues from a single leader, until we do that, then it will never be viable for a leader to expose their weaknesses in that way. Because the populace that are looking for them for leadership won't accept it.
Well, it depends how you define leadership.
Yes.
I mean, is leadership about strength in all respects? I don't think it is.
No, I don't think it is. No, but I think we create leaders in that image.
I think that there's going to be a shift in the way leaders are perceived, what it is to be a leader. You know? Now, again, I'm not a business analyst, I'm not a psychologist, I can't speak other than just for myself, but I can see, nevertheless, if you look at the language and the tone of the language of younger people who were disadvantaged, were disenfranchised, who weren't thought to have any voice of any consequence. And I think now you're seeing, it's very interesting. I mean, obviously, the Me Too movement, I'm slightly ambivalent about. I mean, clearly some people behave despicably, but there is a sense somehow that, you know, people are jumping on the bandwagon a little bit after the event. But what has been very interesting indeed is this whole thing around this girl, Greta Thunberg, you know, the climate change, which, you know, once upon a time, almost like a holiday project, which has become a bit more than that, and suddenly not quite so easily dismissed, and suddenly when you find actually you've got 5 or 10 or 20 million people all behind it, and they've got a voice, and they're more important than that, they have a vote. Now that's a really big game changer in my view, Richard. You know, it's all very well we sit here and talk about, okay, well, hang on, we can put things down, and maybe people won't agree because about the cost of it. I agree with that to a degree. But the fact of the matter is that the people who matter most of all, you and me, Trump, not important. Young people, that's the future. And what they think is everything. I think you see that, you know, people who mistake that are in for a big shock. Maybe not in our lifetime, let's say 50 years, I don't know. You know, it's interesting to me that, you know, you look at the candidates for the US presidency, and they're all in their mid to late 70s. I find that extraordinary in a way, because what that country needs is energy, it needs fresh ideas, it needs fresh direction, it needs inclusive leadership. It needs people who are humble enough to say, you know, something, guess what? I was wrong, I cocked it up again, you know, what kind of schmuck am I? You need that human factor. The idea that, you know, once upon a time, you know, kings and leaders were often people who led you into battle and conquered nations and so on and so forth. But the idea of a leader as a warrior is not there anymore. Now, Donald Trump leading into battle, worrying about his bouffant hairstyle, you know, blowing in the wind. I mean, come on. No. We say, Donald, you know something? We'll see you on the beauty party on the other end of the parade. Yeah. No, of course not. Again, the notion of what it means to be a leader needs to change. And I happen to believe, as I said before, that empathy, engagement, inclusiveness are really the key ingredients. You can always buy in the expertise from elsewhere.
But and I think that's right. But I think that shift can only happen if we also see a shift in our cultural systems, if you like. So we raise the stake. We lower the stakes for the leader, because if you're pushing authority down, then those in the central positions have less power. So we reduce their power. If you look at somewhere like Switzerland, some ridiculous percentage of the populace of Switzerland can't name their prime minister. Why is that? Because so much of the power is devolved to the cantons, right?
Yes,
and a lot of decision making is made through plebiscites. So you don't have so much centralized power. So in that scenario, I can imagine it would be much easier for the Prime Minister of Switzerland to divulge their weaknesses and be vulnerable and show their humanity than it would for, say, the President of the United States. And I think that's a shift that we need to see in public life and in businesses if we want to see this shift in how much we're allowed to be human, you know, in our lives.
I think in a way it is down to institutions. I think institutions obviously are comprised of leaders and followers. And I think the imbalance needs to be corrected to some extent. I think that more followers need to speak up and more leaders need to listen.
Yes.
So going back to my point about listening and speaking as the most valuable tools we have, our brain has allowed us that particular gift. Now, I'm sure you're very aware of the old maxim that we were given 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason, and they should be used in due proportion. In other words, people talk too much, they listen enough. And I think you see that if more leaders listened and more followers spoke up, I think that gap would diminish. Now, again, I'm not a business analyst, and clearly I'm speaking in rather sort of freestyle fashion here, where I'm just sort of spouting ideas, some which maybe in the cold light today be thought were complete nonsense. But nevertheless, I think there is a shift, and I can't define it in quite the right terminology or language, but I just sense, I was talking before, but my kids are all in their 20s now, so old enough that they know their own mind, but they've come from a world which is very much on the cusp of the change in usage of personal technology. Slightly borderline. They're all involved in creative industries in one form or another, so they understand enough. Your kids are rather smaller. They're 20 years behind, effectively.
Yeah.
And it'd be interesting if we have this conversation, hopefully with Kieran in tow, in 20 years' time, in this boardroom, saying, yes, so guess what? It's like, you got that right. That, oh my God, what do you think? How crazy he was that? Yeah. Because, of course, one does find that all too often, there's a repetition of a cycle through history. Whether economic behaviour, whether indeed, more prosaic things, changing fashion, arts and so forth. Those things are a variation of what went before. I wonder to what extent, if you go back 150, 200 years, whether this country or maybe France or somewhere else, was there a different kind of politics where actually what you found the gap was actually rather narrow than it is today? Where the people who are leaders listen more and the followers really speak up more. And whether the nature of the dialogue changes because of social media, maybe a good benefit, it remains to be seen. But I think it's about people feeling that they have permission to speak up as followers. And the leaders feel they have permission to let go, to drop the reins, to say, I don't care about my shareholders, I don't care about the industry or peer group reviews. I know fundamentally these people need to be a part of the conversation. I think, for example, every major PLC should have representatives in the boardroom from the shop floor or the equivalent. All of them. I mean, why wouldn't you do that? I mean, what kind of crazy thing is that? We say, we only want people like ourselves. I mean, it's extraordinary. There are conversations going around about the fact that you haven't got enough ethnicity, for example, or enough women, people of a certain age. Why not? Why not? What are people so scared about? That they're a bit crap? Or maybe they are a bit crap. And we'll find out how crap they are and how crap their behaviour has been to the detriment of the company. I think there's a very deep insecurity at the top of major organisations, both in business and indeed not-for-profit. And I just feel that not knowing is actually an invitation to a brighter future. Because when you don't know, you ask questions. Unless you are so insecure, you don't even allow people to think you don't know, and therefore you essentially replicate all the mistakes of the recent past. So for me, encouraging dialogue, engagement, empathy, rapport, occasionally argument, but certainly along the way, quite a bit of laughter. These are all key ingredients of the offline philosophy. And for better or for worse, I can only say, having hosted many days, 50, 60, 70 days over the years, I just know that when you get people together and you give them permission to be vulnerable and to be themselves, suddenly all things are possible, and that's a wonderful thing.
Wow. Well, what a note to end on. Howard,
Pleasure.
thank you so much
Pleasure.
for your time.
Thanks for having me.
And for sharing this wonderful building.
Pleasure.
Thank you.